came to Lichfield a man named Chad, whose works were to have a profound and lasting effect on the history of the city. He came to a place where, so legend says, 1,000 years before Christ, ancient Britons practiced their rites. His bishopric brought the ecclesiastical centre from Repton to Lichfield. He was also responsible for reconciling the church with the Kingdom of Mercia. In 1776, Dr. Johnson brought James Boswell to Lichfield in order that he might experience, as he wrote, genuine civilised living in an English country town. And even today, more than 200 years later, the city continues to retain the atmosphere and civilised charm of a large village. Surrounded by some of the most picturesque countryside in England, large areas of natural pools and well-maintained parklands lead you effortlessly right to the heart of a city rich in history and boasting one of the finest cathedrals in the land. For a city relatively unknown on the usual tourist trails, Lichfield's quaint and colourful streets are a delight, brimming with character and historical interest. Boar Street, with its diverse architectural styles spanning almost 400 years. Market Street, once known as Sadler Street and still bearing witness to Lichfield's turbulent past. Cronian's Lane, with its charming timber-framed cottages dating back to the 16th century. Around every corner there lingers something new and exciting. And throughout the year there's a wide and varied programme of customs and events which ensure that Lichfield has got something for everyone. The Shrovetide Fair and Pancake Race, the Green Hill Bound, the Sheriff's Ride, and the Court of Oran, bringing to life some of the more colourful episodes of the city's distinctive history. The earliest origins of the settlement remain obscure, but in the 1st century a Roman fort called Lato Cetum was built at the nearby village of Wall. The Romans left in the 5th century, and more than 200 years later St Chad established his bishopric at a place nearby called Lichfield. Markets have been held in Lichfield since medieval times, and over the centuries the marketplace has witnessed some of the most notable incidents in the history of the city. During the reign of Queen Mary in the 15th century, several martyrs were burned at the stake. Lichfield moved into the 18th century as a centre of genteel society, a thriving coaching city, witnessing the emergence of great intellectual activity, and during this time it was home to many famous and influential people. David Garrick, the actor and manager who introduced many and much needed reforms into the theatre. Erasmus Darwin, the author of The Botanical Garden. Anna Seward, who, through her poetry, letter writing and standing in literary circles, earned the nickname the Swan of Lichfield. But none was more famous than Dr. Samuel Johnson, biographer, critic, poet, and journalist famed for his wit. Johnson was born in this house in Breadmarket Street. Today the house is a museum, a living testimony to the great man's works.
Samuel Johnson was born in this, his father's house, on the 18th of September 1709. He was educated at Lichfield and Starbridge Grammar Schools, where he received an excellent grounding in classical literature. Unfortunately, his period at Pembroke College, Oxford, was cut short because of financial difficulties and increasing mental depression. He was a man of massive proportion and great physical strength, ungainly, slovenly and uncouth. But for all this, his intellectual powers were immense, and his tenderness and kindness to others were renowned. After a fruitless search for employment as a schoolteacher, he drifted into a career of journalism and writing, but his desire to teach was never forgotten. After spending time in London and Birmingham, he met and married Elizabeth Porter. Elizabeth was 20 years older than him and had 3 grown-up children from a previous marriage. Together, they set up a school just outside Lichfield near Edgell Hall. In fact, David Garrick was a one-time pupil there. Unfortunately, the project was doomed to failure, and upon its closure, the couple moved to London. Once again, Johnson drifted back to journalism, and after spending several years hack-writing, was offered the major task of compiling an English dictionary. The project brought him a great deal of fame, but very little financial reward. During his lifetime, 5 editions of the dictionary were published, and eventually he was awarded a government pension of £300 a year, which put an end to his years of struggling. The backbone of his later years was the closeness of his relationships with Henry and Hester Thrale, and his friendship with famous men and women such as James Boswell, Sir Joshua Reynolds and Oliver Goldsmith. To some extent in these later years, Johnson became public property, continually being sought for his advice on worldly and literary matters. On his death in 1784, a friend commented, "Johnson is dead. His death has made a chasm. Let us go to the next best. There is nobody. No man can put you in mind of Johnson." That just about sums up his life.
Johnson returned to Lichfield many times. This plaque in Breadmarket Street, opposite the side door of St Mary's Church, marks the site of the 3 crowns in which he usually stayed. Every year a wreath is laid in his honour by his statue in the marketplace, and later a supper is held by the Johnson Society in the Guildhall. The Guildhall has been the city's centre of government for the past 600 years, and although the original building dates back to the early 15th century, most of the present Gothic-style building was not completed until 1842. The front of the building is dominated by this delightful stained glass window, gifted from the cathedral, and below that are 2 stone portraits of King George V and Queen Mary, commemorating the King's succession in 1910. Over the main door is the city crest bearing the inscription Salve Magna Parens, Hail Great Parent.
The Guildhall has been central to the city's government for the past 600 years, and although the original building dates from the early 15th century, most of its present Gothic style dates from 1848. 87 feet long by 25 feet wide, the high-pitched roof and the hammer beams of the hall help create its fine medieval appearance. At the north end is the large stained glass window that was originally in the north transept of the cathedral. Held each year on Spring Bank Holiday Monday, the precise origin of the Court of Array, or View of Men and Arms, is unknown, but an annual review of local defence forces existed in the city before the 12th century. The statutes of array were repealed during the reign of James I, but Lichfield, with its long tradition, continued to hold the court each year, although it must be said in a much more light-hearted manner. Closely linked to the Court of Array were the festivities of the Greenhill Bower. A procession of decorated floats arrives at the Guildhall for the conclusion of the court, and there, the mayor crowns the Bower Queen before leading the procession on a circuit of the city. is yet another opportunity for visitors to let their hair down. The Old Fair, as it is called, probably existed long before it was confirmed by Royal Charter of James I in 1623. As the civic procession arrived in the marketplace for the 12 noon sounding of Pan on Bell, the town crier makes his proclamation opening the fair.
Will be held at Guildhall for the redressing of all grievances or complaints which shall happen or arise during the time of this fair. God save the Queen and the lords of this manor.
The proclamation made, and the sounds of the bells still ringing, the children, led by the mayor, rush forward to claim their traditional free ride. The civic party assemble outside the Guildhall for the more recent tradition of pancake racing.
Ready, go!
The sheriff's ride commences in the market square at 10:30 on the Saturday nearest to the 8th of September. Holding true to the age-old custom, the sheriff and his retinue of almost 200 horsemen, Land Rovers and other vehicles still undertake the 16-mile perambulation of the city boundary. Returning to the city, the sheriff is greeted by the sword and mace bearers, and the party is then escorted to the close to be received by the dean.
Thank you, gentlemen.
The various events held in Lichfield are designed not only to preserve its time-honoured customs, but to entertain the many visitors to the city. We aim to provide something for everyone, and I believe we do just that.
At various times, the Guildhall has been Lichfield's court, police station, jail, theatre, and even fire station. Downstairs, at the rear of the building, are the remains of the old jail, complete with cells and stocks. Watching maternally over the whole proceedings since medieval times has been the Church of St Mary, a place of worship, providing panoramic views of both city and cathedral. Twice rebuilt in its lifetime, it has now been converted to include a coffee shop, a gift shop, a day centre for the elderly, and the Lichfield Heritage Exhibition and Treasury. In the late 1970s, the ambitious and imaginative St Mary's project was instigated to save the church from possible extinction. It was a project which fired the imagination of the authorities and public alike, and today St Mary's houses a unique exhibition of Lichfield's history, depicted through displays, tableau and audio-visual presentations. The treasury is of particular interest, exhibiting superb examples of the art of silversmiths, together with incomparable displays of chalices, goblets and centrepieces from the city, the church and local regiments. Despite its more recent development, St Mary's continues to maintain its link with the past. The Diet Chapel remains intact for private worship, and outside, events it has witnessed are chronicled through plaques on its front wall. Market Street preserves its links with more turbulent times in Lichfield's history. It's alleged that in this elaborate timber-framed house, Robert Granville, 2nd Lord Brooke, established his headquarters on arriving in the city. And diagonally opposite is the townhouse of Richard Dart, who raised an army to fight for King Charles I at the Battle of Edge Hill. Lichfield suffered much during the Civil War. The precincts of the cathedral were turned into a battlefield, and they were the scene of no less than 3 violent sieges. Brooke House in Dam Street witnessed the fateful end of the Parliamentary General Robert Granville, the 2nd Lord Brooke, in yet another colourful episode in Lichfield's history. The parliamentarians had employed a large cannon called Black Bess, especially brought up from Coventry to bombard the cathedral. Lord Brooke made his way from his lodgings in Sadler, or as it's now called Market Street, to survey the proceedings. Two men observed his movements from the cathedral tower. One of them was John Dyett, who had been deaf and dumb from birth. Brooke watched as Black Bess fired once, twice, before lifting his face guard to see more clearly the damage inflicted by his ordnance. Dumb Dyett seized his opportunity, firing once with a fowling piece loaded with lead shot made from the cathedral roof, and killing Brooke in an instant. The royalists were jubilant, hailing the parliamentary leader's death as a sign of divine displeasure, particularly as his demise came on St. Chad's Day. Take a look at the place where Dumb Dyett stood, and decide for yourself, was Brooke's death the result of divine intervention or just a lucky shot? Of Sir William Brereton, another parliamentary leader, cannons were once again turned on the cathedral. For many hours they continued to pound the building, eventually causing a direct hit. The central main spire was demolished, crashing down into the choir and across the altar with a thunderous roar. Also boasting connection with Lichfield's military history is the King's Head in Bird Street, which was later to become the headquarters of the South Staffordshire Regiment. In 1830, Lichfield boasted 55 inns and 17 beer houses, a drinking establishment for every 90 inhabitants. It had 5 breweries producing 7,000 barrels or 250,000 gallons of beer every single week. The Swan is probably the oldest surviving city inn dating back to the 15th century. It was rebuilt during the latter half of the 18th century to cater for the coaching trade. Within the hotel, some 18th century panelling remains in the main bar, while some original 15th century beams can be seen in some of the bedrooms. Bedroom number 4 is of particular interest as it was once occupied by Dr. Johnson himself. For many years it was the headquarters of the local Tory party and was very much a political and commercial rival with the George Inn across the road. The George Inn, now the George Hotel, was also a centre of great activity. Through this archway, across cobbled stones, and into what was then the courtyard of the coaching house, horse-drawn carriages would arrive from as far away as London and Carlisle. Until its closure in 1995, the Arts Centre hosted the Real Ale Jazz and Blues Festival as a precursor to the main Arts Festival, attracting artists and supporters from near and far and offering a range of real ales that would tempt anyone's palate. The Lichfield Arts Festival, held over 10 days in early July, is a leading national arts festival, attracting major performers and artists, both local and international. The emphasis of the festival is on classical music, which is supplemented by jazz, poetry, drama and other arts events. But for many people, the real attraction of Lichfield is its pools and open parklands. Landscaped by Anna Seward, Minster Pool is now a haven for wildlife, though in darker days, when Lichfield was in its infancy, it separated the city from what is now its ecclesiastical centre. Throughout history, this area of Lichfield has been below water, and in the 13th century a narrow bridge just 7 feet wide was constructed which, together with a similar bridge in Dam Street, provided the only access to the cathedral. Beacon Park and Gardens are set in 75 acres of parkland, laid out with playing fields and catering for a wide range of sporting activities. It also has 2 statues, one of King Edward VII dated 1908 and the other of John Smith, captain of the ill-fated Titanic, which sank after hitting an iceberg in April 1912. On the edge of Beacon Park is the Old Library, which, or so it is claimed, was the first library in England to provide free lending of books. Lichfield has many other picturesque areas. Stowe Fields in the shadow of the cathedral, Stowe Pool where sailing takes place throughout the summer, and the Festival Gardens near to the Friary. It was during the 13th century that the Franciscan Friary was founded. Unfortunately, only a handful of the original buildings survived the Reformation of the 16th century, and what was probably the Friar's Guest House can still be seen today forming the western end of the college and library. Equally picturesque is the serene and secluded Vicar's Close, adjacent to the cathedral.
Welcome to Lichfield Cathedral. It's an old and very beautiful building. It's been standing here for 800 years waiting for you to come and visit it. There's a tremendous amount to see when you come in, and you'll be sure of a warm welcome from our welcomers, our guides and our vergers, and all the people who work here. It's got an interesting history. Lichfield Cathedral was built to house the bones of St. Chad, a 7th century bishop, who was only bishop here for 2.5 years, but an immensely holy man. Then it became a centre of the St. Chad cult and a centre for pilgrimage. After that, a Norman cathedral was built, and then this was replaced by the present Gothic cathedral from 1195. So in 1995, we're celebrating 800 years of the history of this building. So for 1300 years, God has been worshipped on this site. A small congregation of Christians has worshipped God and welcomed the visitor. We hope that today, as you come, you will find peace and refreshment and go on your way with happy memories of Lichfield Cathedral.
Lichfield abounds with historic interest and places to visit. The picturesque churches which surround the city. Dr. Miller's Hospital, founded in 1504 as a home for the poor women of the city. The old probate court standing on the site of the home of David Garrett. St. John's Hospital without the city bars. And the fine red bricked house that was the home of Erasmus Darwin between 1756 and 1781. The Corn Exchange and Market Hall are built on the site of the ancient Market Cross, the northern end of the building complete with buttery and poultry market, occupying what is now the arcaded ground floor. Built in 1856 and paid for by the Conduit Lands Trust, the Friary Clock Tower originally marked the place of the oldest conduit or public water pipe at the junction of Bird Street and the Friary. Equally attractive was the St. John's Street Railway Bridge, originally built from stone supplied from the estate of the Earl of Lichfield. It was designed to give the appearance of a city gateway and was decorated with battlements and heraldic devices. The bridge has changed considerably over the years, although it still bears the arms of 4 Lichfield bishops: Clinton, Hackett, Hayworth and Lonsdale. The 16th century Tudor Cafe exhibits no less than 4 styles of framing on its jetted facade, and further along other shops proudly display their ties with the past. Lichfield has changed a great deal since Johnson's time. Its days of being a bustling coaching place have long since passed. Contrasting architectural styles are springing up all around, and the marketplace no longer echoes with the cackling of fowl and the grunting of pigs as they were driven to market. But one thing hasn't changed. Even today, Lichfield still retains the friendly ambience and village charm of the place that Dr. Johnson once described as being the mother of the Midlands.